here with the young OG, the mayor, big dog Lukey, Lucas Ketelle of ITRBoxing. How you doing, bro? Good to have you
I like
back.
that nickname, the mayor. I like that.
I mean, I feel like it applies to you.
I guess, I'm going to start running with that. The mayor.
You're
So,
the mayor of boxing.
okay, I'm the mayor. So, what are we talking about? People that listen to your show probably know who I am. We don't it's great to be on all that stuff, but they probably want to hear the boxing stuff. So let's get into that.
Well, so basically this weekend, we got Devin Haney and George Kambosas, dude. I mean, the undisputed lightweight championship, one of the fucking best matchups you can make. What's your thoughts about this fight?
It's a good fight. I think anyone that has a brain is excited about this fight. You got arguably the best two fighters, the most accomplished two fighters currently in terms of standing and rank in the division. And they fight in completely contrasting styles. There's drama around the venue. There's drama around the father and Church, the hype man, and Davison can't be at the fight. We always like some drama. Kambosas being underestimated. The crowd is going to be nuts. I mean, I always love these type of fights where the crowd is part of the fight. And I feel like this is going to have a sick crowd and it's going to play a role in the fight. I have no clue how this fight goes, but I know it's going to be entertaining.
So before we get into the actual fight itself, for anyone who doesn't know, including me, what is all of the drama that you're referring to?
So Devin's father, Bill, BH the Great, it has, I guess you'd say allegedly, people believed he was doing something he wasn't. And because of these allegations, he caught a federal charge. I believe, according to him, if you have a charge over a year that's a felony, you're not allowed to go to Australia. So because of that and because of the circumstances, he's not allowed. We believe, though it's not been confirmed, Ben Davison can't travel due to his ties to people within boxing who federal governments are highly skeptical and suspicious of right now for their involvement in things, we'll say criminal espionage. And also like his godfather, Church, I believe, isn't able to travel basically based off of things in his past as well.
So who's going to be in Devin's corner? Because that's like the two guys that are always in the corner.
You don't know the answer to this?
I don't. You're teaching me right now.
Yoel Judah.
No shit.
I think that's a good fit, honestly, because Zab Judah is probably one of the most underappreciated fighters at the time. One could say he was maybe overrated in his era, but now he's really underrated for what he did. And his father was a really, really no-nonsense, tough coach, where if Zab didn't perform, I felt like he was going to have a fight in the corner after he had the fight in the ring. So, I mean, if this fight gets tough, Yoel is not going to be at a loss for words to explain stuff to Devin.
Now, do you have any idea how that partnership came about?
Well, I believe, and I'm nearly certain, Zab Judah, I believe, is the godfather to Devin Haney. So I believe they have basically a family-like relationship. And Yoel, I believe, is he training Alamastia, the Florida fighter that's Puerto Rican that fights in New York? When you were at the Berlanga card, was Yoel Judah cornering someone on that card? Because I believe he has a fighter he's cornering that's been on some of these top-ranked Puerto Rican shows. I can't quite think of it. And I'm sure he's kind of enthusiastic right now to get back in the mix and kind of get going.
How do you think that ultimately impacts Devin and his performance and his strategy? Or is he so tunnel vision that, he's going to make it happen regardless?
Kambosas is the X factor because we saw that his mental warfare actually affected Teofimo Lopez. I would not be shocked if he starts bringing up that his father isn't with him and like that Devin said, talk to me like a man. And then he's going to make fun of the fact that his father isn't there. Kambosas is going to try to make Devin emotional before the fight because I think Kambosas' best path to victory is to have Devin fight with emotion. And it's just going to be, how does Devin handle all of these circumstances leading into this fight?
Yeah, it feels like that's a lot all at one time to have, to not have the corner you used to, particularly when, his pops has been with him his whole career. You look at the time difference, that alone is a challenge in and of itself. And then on top of that, he's in with a fucking great fighter. You know what I mean?
Possibly a legendary fighter in Kambosas, and in a place where we both think Manny Pacquiao beat Jeff Horn, yet they gave the fight to Jeff Horn. So minor details, Devin isn't the biggest puncher in the world. And if this fight's somewhat close, the common belief is Kambosas will get it on the cards, and that's so basically there's a lot that could break a young man. And we're going to see a lot about Devin Haney through this fight. He got what he was looking for. Sometimes people ask for stuff. Devin got his moment to prove he's great right here because the man upstairs is putting a lot of circumstances at him. So now he gets to show us what he's made of.
I mean, and it seems like, particularly in this era, for the most part, a lot of guys need everything to be exactly as they want it in order to take a challenging fight. And he's clearly said, kind of, fuck that. I'll go where it's uncomfortable and take the tough fight.
And you have to respect it because the sport isn't even like a sport anymore. It's more or less like stocks and bonds. Like you build yourself up to be Tesla, and then you're just like, okay, how can I preserve the value of my stock? What's the best Fortune 500 fight I can have? So then I can have another. And we're sitting back here, and this is how they're talking to us about like, well, I made this much for this. We don't care how much you made. We're paying $75 darn near every single month this year in a financial recession where gas is the most expensive it's ever been. Groceries are more expensive than I've ever seen. And then these guys have the nerve to talk about, well, this is the best path for me to make money. Okay, but we don't have to buy it if you keep giving us crap. And I think boxing's just at this weird state where people are forgetting, the fighters are forgetting this is a sport.
How do you think that keeps happening? Do you think it's just that they give us the bigger they give us, a good fight just often enough to keep everybody kind of shut the fuck up? Or, how does that sustain?
Well, I think and this might have been my issue with PBC is I think the good fights happen on the undercards, especially deep on the undercard, which creates the guys that go to the top. Then you kind of have like to become a legend, you have to win a legendary fight. So any top 10 guy has beaten someone. Jermell Charlo, he got a win over Lubin. That was a very iconic moment. That was a crossing, a big point. And then the Castano win to win emphatically. Those are big wins. Kambosas, he gets the win over Teofimo. I just feel like it's such a grueling journey where fighters are so underpaid. When they get to a point of leverage, they don't want to go back to being where they were. So it's like survival and preservation. They want to get as much as they can while they're at their highest earning potential. And I think it's really sad that we don't have a system where if you fight in an entertaining fight, you don't go all the way back down the line. Sean Porter, when he fought Kell Brook, was the IBF champion and then lost his complete ranking in the IBF at welterweight when he lost. He wasn't even ranked 15th. I mean, that's the issue with guys taking competitive fights is that type of crap can happen.
Yeah, and I've always wondered, because it seems like when PBC has a group of guys that are in the same weight class, they're not rushing to fight them, but they will match them at some point. And I've always just wondered, like, how much of it is sheltering and then how much of it is just not wanting to do business out of house, or is it both?
Well, I think that's every promoter, right? Like we have all these promoters, whether it's PBC, Top Rank, Matchroom, all that. They all have great fighters, but it's like these promoters, and it's logical, right? If you don't have to split money with another person, why would you want to split money? So it's like you want to sign up divisions. So it's like if you look, it looks like the modern view of the sport is pick a division. Showtime picked 154. They have basically all the 154 fighters. It looks like PBC has the welterweights. If you're not with PBC, it's going to be hard to get the marquee fights, or if you're not with Showtime. Divisions are being bought up by, it feels like, promoters and networks. And that feels like the new normal. And what I hope to see is with this rush for undisputed, we see fights like Michaela Mayer versus Alicia Baumgardner, where in theory this fight shouldn't get made. But what happened? The two fighters called for the fight, and it does business because it makes sense.
When do you think that point is that it crosses the line of like, okay, now it's worth it?
All these guys talk about business, right? But what's the big thing all business people talk about is like a free market where you can assess value and see where the value truly is. For as much as boxers want to talk about business, they never want to talk about a free and equitable marketplace. So they never want to be like, okay, Charlo versus Golovkin. Let's just put it out to the world, put it out to networks and see who will bid the most. If a network that the fighter that feels like they want the most advantages wins, they're going to retract. Didn't this happen with Adonis Stevenson and Sergey Kovalev, where it was like it goes up to a free market, there's a great purse, and it's like, oh, shoot, we wanted to be the A side, and they pull out. And that's kind of the issue is in this day and age, even with Kambosas, you're hearing him talk about I'm the A side. Who cares? You know, who cares from a fight fan perspective who's the A side or the B side? We know it from a perspective of betting or being logical, or if you're going to the event, who the event is catered around. But realistically, it's like you got to take some of these hard fights to be considered legendary, because in this current climate, we're having too many fighters that are having forgettable careers.
I mean, even if it is somewhat pointless, do you see Kambosas as the A side or as the favorite?
I mean, he definitely is the A side just because it's in Australia and like the general marketing is. I mean, I don't know how to set the lines for this fight because I feel like if Devin does what Devin can do, Devin can make this a very easy fight for himself. I just have to see how he responds to like all the fight week buildup. And Kambosas is someone that's very easy to underestimate, but he's super mentally strong. Like his mental fortitude is what makes him a fantastic fighter. And he's going to fight better on fight night than he does basically for the rest of the camp.
In this lead up, I've been leaning towards Kambosas just off of the TO fight and off of the momentum of that. And then the closer we get to this fight, I lean more towards Devin because there was so many times against TO where he was leaning in, where there was tactically he was giving shit up for George to capitalize on. And Devin's not going to give him all that. Devin's going to get on that fast jab, and it's going to be immediately like, yo, how do I get past this? You know, Devin's going to give him way less opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it just comes down to, like, if this was a video game, I'd rather be Devin Haney than George Kambosas. I'll just put it like that. If it's a video game, all things are equal. I'd rather be that. If this was a video game, I'd rather be that guy. But here's the deal. It's not a video game. This is a young man flying to Australia, and he has to battle some things that, whether he'll speak about now or not, they're very real. Like, this is the first time a father who deeply loves him, who's strategized a beautiful life for him, and it came true, won't be with him every step of the journey. And don't think the guy he's fighting is going to try to bring that every single moment up of fight week, that he's going to be trying to torment him, terrorize him, and make him remember that. And it's all about how Devin responds at a young age to that.
It's going to be a very telling fight, bro. This is definitely like a legacy fight for both of them. And I have so much respect for Devin, you know, taking this fight at this point in his career when he could still be in that, like, no, I need to let it all marinate or whatever the fuck. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I appreciate Devin because, like, Devin and Rolly are guys that, like, they're calling for fights and they take the fights. And how many people are calling for fights and then the fights don't happen? These guys, by any means necessary, Devin, by any means necessary, made this fight happen. Went to another promoter, went to another country. If you don't like this guy, you have to be a hater if you're just looking at it from a pure fight fan perspective, because he's giving you everything the fan says they want. the best matchups, going where it is, not letting the politics dictate things, you know?
It's very special. Another fight that's on that same night, and I think it would get a little more hype if it wasn't on the same night as this, is Stephen Fulton and Daniel Roman. You got any thoughts on this one? I really like this matchup.
I like it, man. I mean, Steven's my guy, Stephen Fulton. I've had him on the pod. I like Stephen Fulton, but how did you see his fight against Figueroa? You tell me what you saw there.
I thought he just edged it by like a fucking eyelash.
Yeah, it wasn't like a very comfortable win, and especially for like what it had at stake. Like he got hurt a lot in that fight, and it was kind of like a shakier performance. I'd say he looked pretty dominant up until that point. And that was a fight where I saw a lot of people want to put him on their pound for pound, but that's one where it's like for him to be on my pound for pound, he's got to run that one back, because that was one of those real asterisk fights where it's like, okay, I'm remembering that. Roman is definitely not the best version of himself, but do you think he presents some of that same style that Figueroa did?
I think he presents some of it. I think he's a little more measured. He's a little like, Figueroa is so reckless, like with his pace. And I think Roman is a front foot guy who takes his time a little bit more. That might not be a good thing. He may get hit a little less, but it might be, trickier for him to win rounds because he's just not constantly, pressing the pace.
My fear is Juan Carlos Payano gave Daniel Roman a really hard fight, and Fulton boxes better than Payano. So I have a feeling they're watching that tape, and they probably have a chip on their shoulder from the Figueroa fight. Daniel Roman, a true good guy of the sport, but I just feel like Fulton has the ability to make this a fight where he just kind of makes it a one-handed fight, moves around and makes it kind of a very tactical, you're not getting on the inside unless you have to eat a punch, and even then I'm going to pivot and turn type of fight.
Yeah, it is hard. It's hard for me to imagine Roman putting on enough pressure to make it similar to the Figueroa fight. I just don't. He's not that kind of guy. He's definitely an aggressive guy, but he's not reckless in the same way that Brandon is.
Yeah, I mean, Brandon Figueroa is one of those guys where I feel like he's going to just get old overnight. Like he's going to be extremely deadly until he's just like, he takes a shot and then he's just going to go out, and then it's going to be gone. But it's like, he's a very hard style because nothing he does is traditional. And what he does is just a lot of volume, and he's believes in his power, and he's really reckless. And it's like, you can't really just box him. You have to fight him in spurts. And I think that's what makes him so difficult.
Yeah, he is a lot like Omar in that sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, it's a fight where it's like, I'm definitely going to tune in. I'm definitely watching the Haney fight first. And I'm definitely going to be looking at people that are watching that fight on Twitter and seeing what they're seeing. And what I mean by that is, like, if people are like, oh man, this is a good fight, I'm going to be like, oh man, I'm not going to watch what they're watching, but I'm definitely going to circle back. But like Yo Elvis Gomez, I haven't sat down and watched that performance yet, but I watched the cliff notes of it, and it's pretty clear. Like, I think he dropped him and then he went 10 rounds with him. I don't need to go and watch the full fight. Like, that's basically kind of like a step back type performance. And it's like, if it's one of those where it's like, okay, I can watch 2 rounds and I don't have to watch all 12, totally fine with that.
Hey, also too, not for nothing with Gomez, like I watched it just because I watched that full card, and I know he's probably gonna get like a lot of criticism for going a full 10 with Coda, but it wasn't like he didn't look bad. It wasn't like it was a close fight. It wasn't really, I don't think Coda won any rounds or anything, and Gomez was putting his combinations together. And to some extent, I think Coda looked pretty committed to finishing to the last bell. You know what I mean? And I think Gomez he didn't get him with that one that shook him. But I get why, that then people are saying, well, but all the other top guys did that fought him,
Well, I think the issue is the matchmaking to me looks like, okay, Charlo and Lubin have sensational knockouts against Coda. Here's this guy that's being fast tracked, and he's literally in a 10-round fight on a major marquee card. And then he goes 10 rounds. And I think that, like, hint, hint, wink, wink, I think they were thinking they were going to get 2 knockouts at the top of the bill. They were going to get the Benavidez knockout, and Cotto was going to set the stage where people go, oh my God, here's another player at 154. And I think what we saw was, if he doesn't feel like he can bomb you out, we might be getting some kind of very tactical Cuban boxing, which is not everybody's favorite thing to see.
And he was tactical. You're right. He was tactical, but I think he was pretty aggressive. It wasn't like he was, like waiting for Cota to give him something to counter. He was pressing him, and he didn't have that one explosive one that changed, you know what I'm saying? Changed the fight.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, there's reasons why you have to typically wait in line. So, like, when you skip the line at a nightclub, you better be pretty important, because people are going to be pissed. If you're not the cool guy if people don't want to take a photo with you and you're skipping the line, chances are someone's going to not like you. If you're in boxing and you have to go to the line and you're skipping the line, you got to be as good as the guys that you're skipping to get to that part of the line. And my problem with this was, it felt like he was trying to skip a good chunk of the line, but he didn't really feel like he could pass the exam the way the exam was set up. That we were looking for him to pass a driver's test. He might have passed it, but he might have gotten that, well, we need you to do the rules exam as well. We need you to come back. You know what I mean? It wasn't the way that I think it was intended to pass. And I mean, I think that there's no fault to that, but I think that we have to temper our expectation for Yo Elvis, because I think we were thinking, oh my God, big knockout Cuban guy. And in this fight, he kind of showed, okay, I might go back and do some Lara stuff on someone.
Yeah, and it's off of that fight, it's tough for me to say that I think a fight with him and anybody that Coda's been in with is like all that interesting yet.
I mean, they're just rushing him. Like, it's like they think they have a really talented guy who has he probably has like a zillion amateur fights. I want to believe someone told me his father was like a gold medalist in the 1980 Olympic Games. It's obvious he has a high boxing IQ. There's a ton of pressure on him. It sucks boxing's this way, but sometimes when you're in these spots, we have expectations for you. And he just didn't meet my expectations as a spectator. I could be wrong, but that's just how I felt watching. I was waiting to see a highlight reel clip. And then when I was kind of skimming through, I'm like, why is Cota still standing? Like, this is not what I expect from these type of fights. I'm expecting like Rock'em Sock'em, and I was expecting Gomez to land a bomb. And then we have the highlight footage, and then it's possible Yo Elvis versus Lubin. That's where I was thinking he was potentially going. Yo Elvis versus Harrison. He's at this tier for another 3-4 fights at least.
I agree. And I think maybe this fight was a good experience as far as getting that pro experience and seeing what the difference is and how you got to hit guys. Maybe this is his, Lomachenko and Salido, and it's not a loss, but maybe it's his opportunity to, like, okay, now I understand what I'm going up against a little more.
Well, the problem is like, we live in a world where college is devalued, and like everyone wants things as fast as possible. So it's like, now when someone turns pro, they're like, I want to win a world title in 6 fights. I want to win a world title in 7 fights. And it's like, guys like Brad Goodman, Bruce Trampler, Robert Diaz, they've made a lot of world champions. And the way they did it was through a system. And now it's like, we're having guys, Ron Katz is another great matchmaker. And now I feel like these guys are going to the matchmakers being like, okay, I'm better than anybody you've ever seen. Put me in this fight. Because I don't think many matchmakers would put these fighters in these type of fights. Don't you think this would be a management decision to get them moving this quickly? Because it's like, if I were moving Yo Elvis, unless he has some crazy financial situation where you have to move him quick, I would assume I'd want like a year or 2 of him fighting some solid veteran guys, the Vaughn Alexanders of the world, the Luis Ariases of the world. Just go through that whole system, kind of like how guys, RIP Max Davashev did, how Janabek did on the come up. fight really. Mean Machine's another one. I thought he'd be on that kind of circuit where you're fighting really good regional fighters that might have one or two losses. Like a guy, it'd be a good fight for Yo Elvis, but I'd like to see the other guy get paid. Aaron Coley, our buddy, Jamonte Clark. These are the type of guys that he should be having fights with for like a good 2 years. And I feel like they were trying to cut all those fighters and go to the top. And I just think that it's a little too fast.
I think you might be right about that. Another one that I wanted to talk about, which is oddly going to be like on a Tuesday morning. I don't know what the thinking is there, but Inoue and Donaire are going to rematch finally. The first fight was like November 2019. Like I said, this is going to be on Tuesday morning. Don't you think this is like a great fight that should not be on a Tuesday morning?
Oh, it sucks. I will always remember this because my good friend Mike Basil flew from that fight. He worked Donaire's corner and he came to Fresno to a Top Rank show, and he had just landed from Japan to Fresno. And I was in his room and he was talking me through the whole fight, and I had just seen the fight. So I always remember that moment because I remember seeing Baz land from Japan to Fresno, and he's just exhausted. It's like a man that's so tired because it's like he flew there, comes in, he's working full nights of cards. And I think it just speaks to a big issue with Inoue's career is he is a massive fighter in Japan, and it's obvious he's one of the best fighters in the world. Yet it doesn't seem like the complete world is tuning in. It's like he's a certain subsection hardcore fan will turn in, but for his talent, he's not, the world is not stopping to watch him. And that's a troubling trend right now because this should be a fight that's circled and anticipated. And I think 95% of fight fans are going to sleep through this and maybe just see a result through like Supreme Boxing on Instagram.
I know that I didn't even really process that that was a different date than all of these other fights. And I'm looking at it and it says June 7th. I'm like, this is just as big of a fight as any of them, to be honest, in some ways, between the significance of the first fight. This is also a unification fight. Like you said, Inoue is one of the most exciting fighters in the world, and Donaire is probably a Hall of Famer. You know what I'm saying? This is not like this is a way more important matchup than Golovkin and Murata. Now, obviously, that was on at 5 o'clock in the morning, but my point being, like, this is an important fight to be inaccessible.
And I think that it just comes down to money. They can make the most money, and this is probably the day they could get. But I think the issue I have is it's like Donaire is basically in a way from 10, like Donaire was in a way 10 years ago. That's who Donaire was, the big little man. And now Inoue is basically looking at him 10 years from now, or 20 years, or 15 years, whatever the age is. And this is a really compelling fight. Yet, since like Inoue's tried to come to America with Top Rank, he hasn't really made a dent in anything boxing, really. He's been a guy, like kind of an afterthought, kind of made no connection with American fight fans. And it's kind of strange because he has a lot of the traits of like fighters that tend to do that, like Golovkin and Pacquiao, where it's like they just show up, they don't really say much, and they knock people out. That tends to be America's favorite way to access a foreign fighter, knockout, and then they show up and then they just barely say anything, kind of like they're Bill Goldberg. A part of me wonders if it's ever going to happen for Inoue, because it's like he has the complete package: timing, speed, power. He's beaten good fighters, and still it's like it's hard to fully care. And it's so strange.
Fight. And this is the big fight. You know what I'm saying?
And I'm not going to lie to you. Like, I'm excited about this fight, but I'm not super excited that I'm going to wake up in the morning for it. Like, it's not like, and that's strange, right? Because I love boxing, but it's like he goes out of sight, out of mind for so long. I start to forget how good he is. Like, that's the issue with Inoue right now.
It's like when I think he was fighting one of the Maloney boys, and Tim Bradley was saying something about like, oh, I don't get it. I don't get what all the hype is. And then by the end of the fight, he was like, nah, this is a bad boy right here. I feel like that's everybody that watches him. Like they're like, I can't remember if that guy was that special or not. And then by the end, you're like, this is the guy I want to watch.
But the issue is like when he has one of those, like the Jamie McDonald first round knockout, great fight. It's like he'll get a first round knockout and then we're waiting a few months or we're waiting 5 months. And it's like, this is a guy that I feel like, especially if he's right, like knocking off these knockouts, this is a guy that could go on a world tour, Japan, Britain. Like if he's getting first round knockouts, just keep this guy going because it's like, this is like a lower weight Mike Tyson. And it's just like, I feel like at the path he's going, he's a brutal knockout waiting to happen because he's so inactive. And it's like he's at some point he's going to meet someone that's just as physically strong.
Well, I think in a lot of ways, Donaire might be as physically strong because he's naturally bigger. He's already fought at, some higher weights. I was thinking about like, and I think this is pretty much a 60-40 fight towards Inoue. Nonito's had such a great stretch the last couple of years, and the first fight was so close. But I still just barely give the edge to Inoue. But I was thinking about Nonito's career. And what is your take on like the stretch of his career that kind of went from the second Darchinian fight up to like the Frampton fight, where he's at these higher weights, he's losing decisions to guys like Magdaleno, and now when he comes back down, he's this dominant guy again. Like, what is your take on that 5-year stretch?
Well, you got to remember, I wish I had my photo of me and Nonito together. That's one of my rare smiling photos. Like that, I have a photo with Nonito. Like when I was first coming into the game, Nonito was the boxer of the year in the Bay Area, and he's from the Bay Area. You got to remember, I've been around Nonito Donaire Sr. a lot. I really like Nonito Donaire Sr. a lot. I've been around Glenn Donaire, who many people thought Glenn was better than Nonito when they were coming up, right? So Nonito Jr. I think the issue with Nonito has never been talent. It's always been motivation. And anyone that tells you about Nonito, that's going to be the thing. Because like the big thing from people that were working in his camps would be like, okay, Nonito's training hard today. It was never about the talent. It was just getting Nonito motivated to want to train because he's a guy that would want to spar. He's a guy that would want to do certain things. He's a selfless person, but he's never been a gym rat. And I think that what happened was, correct me if I'm wrong, he wasn't around all the Bay Area people. He had moved to Las Vegas, and I believe he had been kind of running his own camps for those. And what I think you saw was that's what it looked like. The Frampton fight in particular looked like that's what Nonito Donaire looks like if he's going to run his own camp and he isn't fully motivated. And I think 126 was a weight class where he got away with a lot of bad habits. Like he didn't have to be as disciplined and train as hard to make the weight. And I think guys that have issues with discipline at times, you never want to play that game. I think forcing himself to mentally go back down in weight has been really good on him because he knows he can't cut corners. He knows he has to train to make the weight. And I think that really what we're seeing is Nonito going down in weight re-sparked a fuse in him. But also like when he fought Jesse Magdaleno, I thought Nonito beat Jesse Magdaleno. Like he's had a lot of these weird performances where people like act like he's washed up. I just think that Nonito is very inconsistent. He has trouble consistently putting forth amazing performances. He'll put together one of the greatest fights you've ever seen, and then he'll give you a dud, and then he'll give you a great moment, and then he'll have two snoozers. It's like he doesn't ever kind of consecutively put it together, at least off the top of my head.
So how do you think he's been able to maintain this longevity and even kind of find like a second prime at 37?
Incredible talent, generational power, and I think also just getting re-excited in the sport. I can speak to that in my passions. Sometimes, like, I think he hit a point where he was extremely burnout on boxing and might not have loved it and was just going through the motions. I think he refound his love for the sport and wanted to actually accomplish something again in the sport. And I think when he saw Inoue, that got him excited. I think that seeing a worthy challenger out there, because when he was going for the 26s, no disrespect to Nicholas Walters, but Nicholas Walters, even though he knocked out Donaire, that's not a guy that's going to get a legend super excited. It's a big, tough, physical fighter who hits hard. Like Nonito is probably in his mind thinking about the Lomachenko's of the world. And I think going to 118 and having a chance to fight another Hall of Fame type fighter, I think that got him going, winning the World Boxing or getting into the World Boxing Super Series and really performing well. I think he realized, even though he doesn't have all the things he used to have, now he's a more mature person that he can do the things he wishes he could have done when he was younger. And because he's so talented and he's so gifted and he built that groundwork at an early age, he's able to do it at an older age where most people, when some of their reflex and speed deteriorates, he's so talented, he can still get away with it with his timing and power.
Well, and I think it's amazing that he's been able to learn those lessons and now apply them this late in his career, particularly when, people are always saying, the guys at the lower weights, those margins for error as you start to age are way smaller because it's more speed based. So,
but he's not your traditional lower weight fighter. He's a big guy. He's like a Golovkin. People don't, they call him the Filipino Flash. He's so fast. But I mean, if you think about Nonito or Inoue, they're both big little guys. They fight like Vic Darchinyan. Like that always drives me nuts. I got a friend named Sev, and he put me onto this. I mean, Inoue and Chocolatito are basically doing what Vic Darchinyan did in the lower weights, but no one wants to bring up Vic because it just looks more sloppy. But Vic brought a lot of excitement to the lower weights because he was a little fighter who fought flyweights and all those guys and did what a welterweight would do to him. And that's what brought interest in, right? And I feel like there is spiritual inspiration from the Chocolatitos, the Nonitos, and the Inoues, but a lot of times boxing purists are so snobby, they don't want to bring up the brute force guy.
I feel you, bro. I guess if Inoue is to win this fight, what do you want to see from him next?
I mean, I just want to see him at reasonable hours in fights where we can actually have a fight week where we talk about, because it's like we're gonna have this fight happen. We're gonna watch it. We're gonna enjoy it, and a bunch of people aren't gonna watch it, and a bunch of people won't care. And then at the end of the year, a bunch of people are going to try to put it on their fight of the year list. And it's going to be like, well, it didn't really impact the world. And that's a part of a fight of the year. Like, you have to pick the fights that matter in the world. And it's like when he fought Donaire the first time, the world stopped. It was such a good fight. People went back and revisited the fight. Inoue was like, kind of like Jorge Linares, Pacquiao, Lomachenko. He's a word of mouth guy at that point. Like you got to see this guy. I feel like the soup has boiled over. It's like he should have bubbled by now. That was 3 years ago. He should be the star now. And he's completely, in terms of a brand, he's regressed as a name. He's probably as unexciting as a fighter in terms of a marketable headliner as he's ever been since he's been a star.
Do you think that's being at 118, or you think that's just how he's moving?
I think it's just a slew of issues, right? Like it's like he had a West Coast American promoter with Top Rank at the time of a pandemic, when it's probably really hard to fly him from Japan to America. So there's this logistical nightmare. And then I think you have that issue we were talking about earlier with Showtime, right? So Showtime's really invested in 118 and 122. So they have a lot of the good fighters. They were going to make the John Real Casimiro fight. He moves. Now, like, what's the next fight for Inoue? Maybe Paul Butler. But it's like, because the new normal is just like networks picking up fighters and monopolizing divisions, a guy like Inoue, like, they have to kind of get creative, or they have to be willing to sacrifice everything to get opportunities. And that's just the nature of what boxing is right now.
I mean, I think off rip, one of the more interesting fights he could be in is a fight against the winner of Fulton and Roman.
Yeah, I mean, just anyone that's interesting. Like the fight I like is Raiz Aleem. Like, I just think Raiz Aleem can't get a fight. So it's like, if a guy can't get a world title fight and he keeps calling out people in a way, like we want to see him fight in America, why not put that fight in Vegas? Raiz Aleem versus Inoue. That's a good fight. I just want to see him fight in fights where like we're actually excited, where he gets a full buildup. This fight's happening on a Tuesday. His media week is going to be overshadowed by the Haney fight and the Fulton fight. His weigh-in is going to be absolutely inconsequential. It's going to be on Monday when I'm in my office right here working. It's like there's going to be no buildup. It's going to be, I'm going to have to make a note on my computer to say, don't look at any boxing website. Just try to go on YouTube or ESPN Plus and watch the fight and hope that the winner isn't in the picture. Like, it's not a guy raising their hand. Yep. And that's what this fight is to me.
I think there's some truth to that. I think the flip side, the only flip side in my mind is that, like, in this new multiple promoter streaming era, there's a lot of other countries where boxing is really big. And for this particular fight, they may have felt like, we can make a ton of money on this without focusing on America. And the Japanese people are going to, show it just as much, if not more love than the American fans. And so it's almost like, in a sense, not every fight needs us to be a big deal,
I get that, but I also would like to see him become kind of a legend.
Yeah.
And I think he needs to fight a little bit in the UK or America, because if he's just a Japanese fighter who's legendary, then like he just becomes a famous Japanese star. And I can't think of many Japanese stars off the top of my head that I can even think of. And that means that it's more of like a local market or a regional star. And I think he has the talent to be a worldwide icon in the likes of a Manny Pacquiao or a Golovkin. So I think he's at a crossroads where he has to decide, what does he want from this sport? Does he want to be in this position in Japan, fulfilling title defenses and doing that? Or is he trying to become a global ambassador for boxing for Japan?
Yeah, 100%. Do you think we ever see Inoue and Chocolatito?
I think the boat's sailed. That fight should have happened at 115. That boat's gone. Like, I just don't think it's gonna. I don't even think we're gonna get Estrada and Chocolatito unless they're both washed up. Like, I think Franco is gonna beat Estrada. Like, Estrada is one of these guys. Like, he pretty much, in my opinion, lost to Chocolatito in his last fight, and then he basically took like a year off of the sport. He's inactive right now. He's coming in to fight Franco. I don't expect him to beat Franco. And like, do we think like Estrada's a guy where like the middle of the last decade, I was like, man, this guy's awesome. Like, Estrada's awesome. He's another one kind of like Golovkin where he's just kind of biding time. Like, it feels like he knows he doesn't have many fights. Like, Golovkin knows he doesn't have many fights left in him. And it's like Estrada, I just feel like he's like, yeah, I'm hanging out for the Chocolatito fight. If it doesn't happen, whatever. And it's like, I just don't see the passion. So I feel like Chocolatito's got maybe 2 fights left, and I just don't see the weights ever matching up.
I think you might be right, bro. It was a fight that I fantasized about for a long time, but I think the more time goes on, the less likely it is. I just thought Chocolatito looked so good in that last fight against Martinez that I was like, maybe.
I mean, the problem is it's like we're dealing with like this new world, and I hate to go business boxing, because if we're going to do that, I'd rather talk to you about stocks. And like, for you, for example, like, this is how I'd like to talk about stocks is like, there's a new company called the Boring Company. It's scalable, right? When you look at a stock, right, you're buying off of earning potential. So if it's scalable up, that would be a great stock to buy. It's a company where it's basically going to be buying back Teslas or leasing. They take it back. Teslas turn into some form of cabs. There's going to be an app component. It seems very doable. So I'd rather talk about those type of conversations than the business of boxing, because that actually benefits me. A fighter's financial earning power does not benefit me at all. So that's a very boring thing to say. But why I say that is, I lost my fucking train of thought. What were we talking about?
We're talking about Inoue and Chocolatito, but I like the new direction you took.
No. What I'm saying is like these guys are fucking like they're looking at their careers as stock pieces, and now they've got third parties coming in. They sign exclusive network contracts, and then they sign with a promoter. And by the time it like for the fight to make quote unquote sense, which means the promoter gets the promoter or the fighter makes the same amount of money as they would for fighting a guy no one's ever heard of, which is why we get these fights where no one's ever heard of. They have to make like 15 or 100 million or something astronomical because the money has to be split now. Let's just say 25 ways as opposed to 4 ways. And that's the true reason why it is. It's just pure greed. It's not like it can't happen. It's just people don't want to concede certain things, or people don't want to be creative and come up with new vessels. I don't understand why you can't get a fighter like Inoue. Try to go to Amazon Prime and just get him on Amazon Prime. Like for all backing, do an ESPN Plus and Amazon Prime deal and just get him on there because that's extra money. And with that extra money, now you're promoter agnostic, or you could go land something else. But the problem I have always with boxing is let's do the same thing over and over again, and then do it again and do it again. And then eventually it's going to work. The creativity and the business component is often like follow the leader, kiss up to someone else, or just like, let's try to do something someone else did that was fairly successful. And that's probably the most uninteresting thing in business. And that's probably why boxing is in such a bad state, is we don't have innovative things in business.
Yeah, I mean, definitely shout out to the everlasting greed of boxing. Where can people follow you, Lukey?
Shoot, just Lukey Boxing, ITRBoxing. Yeah, I mean, it's if you follow Dakota, just follow Dakota. How can they follow you, Dakota? Tell them how they follow you.
I like that you turn the host table around. Well, you can follow me at the Slip and Weave podcast or Dakota McCormick 93, excuse me. And you can see me on the shop every week on ITRBoxing with my man Lukey. Lukey, always a pleasure, my guy.
Yeah, and if you want to get a hold of me, just contact Dakota. Like that's fine, or just type in Lukey. This is shorter than I thought, so I thought I was gonna have to pack a lunch. Love being on. You're the man, Dakota.
I'll see you soon, my friend. Peace.